Thumbs up. Good. Okay. So just a real brief introduction about me. I'm a Washington State and National Board Certified Reflexologist. I'm also a licensed massage therapist. I'm an accredited reflexology instructor, and that's a national organization. And then I'm the founder and program director of a reflexology certification program at Reflexology Academy Northwest in Tacoma. And I'm also a certified reflexology lymphatic drainage, or RLD, practitioner. And that was created by a woman in Wales, mostly for women who had post-mastectomy secondary lymphedema. So a lot of swelling in the arms. And I'll talk a little bit about RLD a little bit later on. So really briefly, in brief, I'm going to go over some of the anatomy and physiology of the immune system, some lesser known and interesting facts and hypotheses about the immune system, and some self-help techniques and tips aimed at strengthening the immune system. So when we refer to the immune system, it's a complex network of cells, tissues, and organs that help the body fight infections and other diseases. Some of the organs and tissues that comprise the immune system: bone marrow and the thymus, lymph nodes and vessels. Everyone's probably perhaps heard of lymph nodes. The spleen, the skin, and a bit of an expanded list: tonsils and adenoids. We add the appendix, and I'll go into the role that the appendix plays. It's quite interesting. And then we have the liver as being added to the immune system. Usually people think of the liver as being part of the digestive system, which of course it is. But what we're finding now, the more I delve into anatomy and physiology, is there's so much crossover between systems, between organs, that it's really hard to segregate and say, like, now we know the endocrine system includes the heart, for instance, that the heart is releasing hormones. About 70% of the immune system is housed in the gut. So we want to make sure our digestive system is in tip-top shape. The spleen is a reservoir for monocytes, which are the largest body, so to speak, of lymphocytes, white blood cells that fight infection. And they're able to step in. If your spleen is removed, other parts of your body, like lymph nodes and the liver, are able to step in and take over many of your spleen's functions. The liver does about 500 different things in the body. It's remarkable what a hard-working organ that is. So please take care, be good to your liver. And we now know that it's a site of complex immunological activity mediated by a diverse immune cell repertoire. There are T and B lymphocytes, natural killer cells, mast cells, granulocytes. That might not mean anything to most people, but so lots and lots of lymphocytes living in the liver. The role of the gut, I mentioned, is pretty significant. The gastrointestinal site is the site both symbiotic and pathogenic of microorganisms. We have communities of microorganisms living in our gut, and disturbances in those may underlie disorders such as inflammatory bowel disease. And it turns out that bacteria can signal to our human cells that turn on and off our genetics. So we tended to think that, we're in control, but it turns out that bacteria can play a huge role in who we are because it can affect our mood and anxiety and inflammation and even our weight. So this is from National Geographic magazine, a photograph, and these cells were dyed, but this is E. coli, which, as we know, can cause food poisoning. but most strains are helpful. So in the gut, they make vitamins K and B12, and they repel disease-causing bacteria. So I just love thinking that we've got these wonderful little assistants living within our gut. The role of the appendix. So when I was studying anatomy and physiology in 1980, when I was in massage school, we learned that maybe the appendix digested grass when we were more vegetarian and living out on plains, and they really didn't know what the appendix, what else it could be for. That it was a vestige of an organ that at one time maybe was useful. They now know that the appendix carries a repository of our microbiome. So if we had cholera, for instance, and we voided out, we had terrible diarrhea and lost all of our gut flora, that the appendix would repopulate the gut flora for us. So it serves that role and also has a large supply of lymphocytes, T cells, B cells, the killer cells. So serving some kind of immune function as well. Your immune system essentially comes from bone marrow. So that's the spongy tissue inside the bones, and that produces red blood cells, platelets, and several types of white blood cells. B cells, which are one category of lymphocytes, develop and mature in the bone marrow, but the T cells develop there and then they migrate to the thymus where they mature. And the thymus is called T cell university, is how I learned it from my Danish reflexology trainers. So it's where these T cells come up to learn self from other. What cells should we attack and what cells should we not attack? Of course, in autoimmune disorders, there's a problem with the cells, white blood cells attacking the body's own cells, and that's a really complicated subject. The thymus is believed to be quite atrophied in adulthood, so it's really active in children. And then I think it's around puberty that it starts to atrophy. But although it's found to shrink in adults, I used to tell people, thump your thymus. I do mine like a heartbeat, thump, 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 as a way to like call out to the T cells to remember what they learned up here, like the vibration of my body. And it might sound a little esoteric, but Dr. Manzanares is a Spanish physician who is the one who did a lot of research to tell us that reflexology works through the nervous system. And he, in his COVID protocol, recommends reflexing the thymus to connect with the stem cells that long ago had migrated there. So stem cells are core cells from which numerous cells develop. And so he's actually recommending similarly that we pay some attention to the thymus in adults, even though it may be atrophied, that there still can be a relationship. So this is a quick aside, but sometimes in reflexology, I'll be working, on someone's shoulder reflex, for instance, and they'll say, oh, I feel something in my stomach, just as a for instance. Well, I'm not anywhere near the stomach reflex, so it's not a direct relationship. My hypothesis is that there is still a relationship between body parts based on the three core stem cells, endodermic, mesodermic, and ectodermic cells, that then go off and develop brain cells or skin cells. So there are relationships between body parts that aren't obvious, but they can be subtle. And I think that's what's at play when people feel something very distinctly, and I'm not reflexing that area at all. Hence, one of the reasons why when we do reflexology, we say in general, reflexology works best systemically rather than symptomatically. So because someone can have gallbladder problems for one set of reasons, and somebody else can have gallbladder problems for an entirely different set of reasons. Most diseases are very unique to the individual, although the symptoms may be quite similar. So that's one of the reasons why we work all systems. We work the whole foot. We work essentially the whole body and mind as well through reflexology. So Seattle Children's Hospital includes a thymus thump on their website. And I quote from their website: benefits of tapping the thymus gland: stimulate your energy system, boost your immune system, and increase your strength. And when you think of the thymus thump of pumping the chest or hitting the chest like this, and you're doing it, pretty lightly, nicely, but think of Tarzan, right? Hitting his chest to show strength and perhaps to summon strength. The word thymus comes from the Greek word thymos, which means life energy. And the thymus is believed to be the controller of the body's meridian system, regulating the energy flow. Hence, a good way to stimulate energy, a good way to stimulate the immune system. So many benefits. This one website from the UK says, as you rhythmically pound on your chest lightly, breathe deeply, and at each thump say, ha, 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 which is kind of interesting in that in Hawaiian, the word ha means breath. And I don't know if anyone's ever heard the word haole, but that's a pretty derogatory term for white people in Hawaii. We're called haulies. And what it means is without breath, because the ancient Hawaiians observed the priests as Catholicism was brought to Hawaii. They observed the priests saying prayers without doing deep breathing. So in Hawaiian Huna, their psycho-spiritual system, deep breathing is a big part of prayer and of connecting to one's spirit and universal spirit, perhaps I'd say. And that's true in many cultures. In the Indian subcontinental Indian culture, we have prana for breath. In Hebrew, it's ruah, and again, that ha sound, prana, ruah, ha for breath. So if you want to include the ha, 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 that's terrific. If you just want to, I usually just thump. And I use it if I get scared. So if somebody cuts in front of me in traffic, I thump my thymus as a way to ground myself again, and also, find strength and not weaken my immune system. So something else from Hawaiian Huna that I have found invaluable is this phrase, cancel for self, to negate what I want to keep my subconscious from imprinting. Like if I pass an auto accident, I immediately say cancel for self, because I was the type of student in massage school who would get a sore throat reading about, something, some condition, they say it's common with a lot of medical students that they get symptoms as they're exposed to reading about these symptoms. So the cancel for self has been absolutely invaluable for me, because then I don't worry that it's going to linger and I'm going to keep making an image of it or keep thinking about it when I don't want to think about it. So like, for instance, what happens when you want to say it in this phraseology of cancel for self, rather than like, don't think about this, because what happens when I say to you, don't think about a pink elephant, right? You think about a pink elephant because I've said the words pink elephant, even though I've said don't think about it. Part of your brain doesn't respond to that and will think about the pink elephant. So you can also use I've used this, the universal symbol of no, this red circle with a red slash through it. And you could use it to imprint over anything that you don't want to keep hanging on in your subconscious. Just cancel for self or use that universal no symbol. So the vagus nerve, is also a very large factor in inflammation. They are now implanting tiny little medical pacemakers, vagus nerve pacemakers for rheumatoid arthritis, for instance. So the vagus nerve is called the wanderer because it has to do with our heart, our lungs, our liver, our colon, our kidney, our spleen, our kidneys. It has many, many ways in which it impacts the body, and it is perhaps the nerve that is most associated with what we call the parasympathetic nervous system, which is our rest and digest. There's the fight or flight, which is the sympathetic nervous system that's pumping blood out to our limbs to enable us to fight or to run. And the parasympathetic nervous system, called rest and digest, I add to that repair, because when we engage the vagus nerve, we are able to make repairs to our system. Really critical. And it is such a big topic that I hope to give another presentation just on the vagus nerve. Now we have something called Polyvagal Theory that has a lot to do with kids who are autistic or have ADD, depression. There's a third phase of inaction of these nerves that can impact us significantly also. So I hope to do a whole separate session on that. The vagus nerve regulates the immune response, and stimulating the vagus nerve can significantly reduce inflammation. There is a wonderful point in the ear, and again, I'll teach that in a subsequent class about the vagus nerve. The lymphatic system. So many people have heard about the lymphatic system, and I mentioned that lymphatic drainage reflexology deals with the swelling that occurs when some of the lymph nodes are removed after breast cancer. So it's part of both, the lymphatic system is part of both cardiovascular and immune system. And the functions of the lymphatic system: it maintains proper fluid balance, it protects the body from harmful infection, it collects excess interstitial, that's in between the cells, and dissolves substances. It absorbs fats and transports fat-soluble vitamins from the digestive system. And it initiates and coordinates a response to remove cellular debris, bacteria, toxins, viruses, fungi, and parasites that accumulate in our bodies. So it's really important to keep the lymphatic system going. In fact, I had read an article that sometimes with breast cancer, you know, we're so used to typing and to keeping our limbs tight into our body. So if you do a lot of typing, you want to make sure on occasion you're getting your arms up and exercising them in some way. Just stretch them, because we want to keep that lymph flowing through the axillary nodes, through the armpit, and get it out of the arm and chest and back into the general system. Here is a map of some of the larger lymph nodes. So we have the cisterna chyli right behind the umbilicus. That's kind of a repository for the lymph from the lower body, and then it's going to move up and deposit into the thoracic ducts. This is a map that shows this right subclavian vein, the shaded area, that drains only the upper right quadrant of the body. For some reason, excuse me, the left subclavian vein is left with draining everything else. Hence, we oftentimes see the right leg, ankle, for instance, maybe slightly more puffy, edema as we call it, than the left. And I think it's probably because it has a lot longer to travel to get back up to that left thoracic duct. So again, the right side is handling only the right side of the head and face and neck and arm and upper torso, and the left side everything else. In our lymphatic vessels are one-way vessels. So we want to encourage the flow in the way in which nature designed the lymph to flow. So you don't want to go against gravity. You always, the lymph flows back up toward that chest area. So you want to always be helping the lymph to flow in that direction. This is a client of mine who had secondary lymphedema. And so the picture on the left, you can see that was the before our session, and 1 week later before the second session, you can see quite a difference, quite a bit of reduction in the fluid in her legs. And she said she could actually feel the lymph flowing during the session. So there are certified reflexology lymphatic drainage practitioners. Sally Kay, who originated it, as I mentioned, in Wales, does trainings online also. And I think they're probably only for reflexologists, but that sure would be something to check out if you want to work on yourself. She also has a book available. And they are practitioners of RLD, of reflexology lymphatic drainage, are getting really good responses with autoimmune disorders also, not just secondary lymphedema. So one way to help to move the lymph is to do what I call squeezing the webbing or milking the webbing between the fingers, between all the fingers, the thumb and the index finger, the index finger and the middle finger. And you can just, if you can see what I'm doing with my index finger, I'm just gently going up and down and over it. So if you want to try this with yourself, and you might find one is more sensitive than another, but this is really terrific for stimulating the upper body lymph. What I like to do is I use my index finger, like the knuckle of it, to create a platform, and then I just use my thumb, as shown here in the picture. But doing this, a couple times a day, periodically, I mean, it feels good too, and can help move that upper body lymph. Lower body lymph. So the reflexes right around the wrist are for the lower lymphatics. So we used to call it as a kid Indian rope burn. I know it's a terrible phrase, but that's what we called it, and that may be familiar to some of you. But you can just back and forth with some friction. So I'm just rubbing, I'm just letting my fingers, my index finger and my thumb, glide over the wrist area to stimulate my lower body lymphatics. Dry brushing is purported as a wonderful way to stimulate lymph flow. So I did a lot of searching around on the web for instructions on dry brushing, and the best resource I found is Dr. Mindy Beck. She's a naturopathic doctor. She's got a YouTube. She also has a fabulous website that has a free PDF of instructions. This is an example. This brush is an example of a typical brush that you'd use for dry brushing. You can get them at TJ Maxx. I'm sure you can get them on Amazon if you shop on Amazon. They may have them at Marlene's. So Dr. Mindy Beck, and if you just search YouTube for Dr. Mindy Beck ND, and you might add dry brushing, and then to get her website, you can just search for that and find the PDF with the instructions. So the role of the adrenal gland, that's another organ that plays a very big role in immune support. And the adrenal glands release adrenaline and cortisol, which are stress hormones. And that reduces the immune system activity. And yet, the body starts a stress response when the immune system is engaged. So cortisol suppresses inflammation. But when it's released long-term, it's going to impact the ability of your immune system to respond well when it needs to. Hence the reason that we want to give our adrenal glands a rest and engage that vagus nerve and get into rest, digest, and repair, and not always be in that fight or flight mode. And this is a nail-on-nail technique to stimulate the pituitary gland. The pituitary gland is called the master gland. So it tells almost all of the organs that release hormones, the organs of our endocrine system, when to release and when not, how much to release and how. And so it's a really can be very powerful to just stimulate the pituitary gland to kind of get it in gear and giving out good directions to everything else, including the adrenals. And so it's pretty much in the center of your nail, and you just take your opposing thumbnail and put the nail on the center of one thumbnail, and you can hold it for 30 seconds. Let's go ahead and do that. Take some nice deep breaths. And just think, I'm centering, I'm balancing, helping to balance my endocrine system. And then you can do the other side as well. We won't take the time to do that here, but just a real simple way to potentially have a profound impact on your endocrine system. So in this article written by my Danish trainers entitled Inflammation, Enemy or Friend, Peter and Dorte say it's not about fighting inflammation, it's about trying to understand why the inflammation is out of control and to help the immune system find a better balance. And they hypothesize that is it possible that our bodies, when seen in an evolutionary perspective, become victims of their own success? That we live in such a relatively sterile environment that maybe our immune system, which has been educated to do incredibly complex and wonderful things, maybe it's kind of bored, like it doesn't have enough to do because we've over sterilized everything. So like the boy in the bubble, if you ever saw that movie or heard that story, if we live in too sterile an environment, we ultimately become, well, in that case, incredibly susceptible because our body's not been able to build up immunities to external factors. I remember reading an article in the New York Times years ago that said, if children suck their thumb until, about age 5, I mean, they tend to have better immune systems. And I don't remember much of the details of the study, but it was hypothesized that, they're able to have a low level of germs, exposure to germs, that's not enough to make them sick, but that's enough to keep their immune system primed. So Kind of an interesting hypothesis. So our bodies are approximately 70% water. And some in Europe are experimenting with turning the water we consume into a vehicle for healing. Writing words of wellness to put under your water glass or pitcher. I mean, think about it, water. So I'm going to show you. So Masaru Emoto photographed water molecules exposed to positive and negative messages. And these are 3 of his books. The Healing Power of Water, The Hidden Messages in Water, and The True Power of Water. So what he found was startling. The photograph on the left is exposure to the words, I can't do it. And look how fractured that water molecule is. And then on the right side is he exposed the water to the words, I can do it. And look how beautifully formed the crystal is. So the water of Fujiwara Dam on the left is just this sort of blobby thing. Hardly even looks like a crystal. And the same water after Buddhist prayer on the right side. So without sounding, religious or too woo-woo, when you think about it, a lot of cultures have a blessing of water, baptism in the Christian faith, the Ganges in Hinduism. So it doesn't cost anything and it can't hurt you. So why not expose your own water to wonderful words? Peter, my Danish trainer, was saying, because I did a class of his, it was an entire class devoted to water. Water has extraordinary qualities to it. And in Europe, they're experimenting with taking photographs of people before they got sick. Now, mind you, some illnesses can take up to 20 years to manifest, but they take a picture of someone well before they got sick, and they're putting it under the pitcher of water or under the glasses of water. For the water because water absorbs the quality of whatever it's exposed to. So if it's exposed, and again, this is, perhaps sounding really woo-woo, but look at homeopathy. Homeopathy, if anyone's heard of arnica, arnica is, for instance, a homeopathic remedy. Homeo meaning like, so it's like cures like for seasickness, tobacco would be used, tobacco. And they would take a drop of tobacco and dilute it to 99 parts water and then succuss it or shake it. And then they dilute it again, so that by the time you get a homeopathic remedy, if you go to Marlene's and you buy a homeopathic remedy, there is nothing left of that substance in the remedy. It is only the energy that was absorbed by the water that is in that remedy. So there are now, Luminous is a company that has made what they call biofield patches for pain and for sleep. There's one for pain and there's one for sleep. And it's the same principle. There's nothing of the substance in it. So you can't be, I won't say negatively harmed for it. It's possible that someone would be that sensitive to a vibration. But again, water is going to absorb whatever it's exposed to. So just think about exposing the water that you drink, and that will become 70% of your body, if not more, to good messages, to messages of good health. Bouncing is incredibly beneficial to the lymphatic system. So whether you jog, jump rope, get a mini trampoline, 2 minutes of gentle bouncing can triple your lymphocyte count, greatly enhancing your body's ability to destroy cancer cells. And I hope, let's see if we can let in. Okay, she's back. So these are from 4 immune boosting tips from the integrative medicine expert at the Andrew Weil Center for Integrative Medicine. He's one of the forerunners in integrative medicine, complementary medicine. Get enough sleep. I'm going to do a class on sleep because I've been researching for my classes, for my students, and I'm reading a book now about sleep, and it will knock your socks off. I mean, how important sleep is. One of the quotes at the beginning of a chapter is something about, something that can reset your immune system, moderate or modulate your emotions, this benefit, that benefit, that benefit. Sleep. Something so simple, so free, and really so incredibly impactful to our health. So get enough sleep, reduce stress, and that's easy to say, but there are many ways to reduce stress, sometimes even just deep breathing, and again, engaging that vagus nerve. But, art projects, walks, guided imagery, whatever you can do to have some breaks from stress, eating well. Again, with so much happening in our gut, we really need to pay attention to the food that we're eating and eat, ideally an anti-inflammatory diet, but certainly staying away from processed foods. And depending on your condition, arthritis, sometimes there are particular foods that exacerbate that create more inflammation. Green tea, curcumin, turmeric reported to reduce inflammation. And consider targeted supplements. Okay, why is my screen not advancing? There we go. The purpose of sleep. By the way, this book is fabulous. It's if you happen to be interested at all in the body, it's called The Body, A Guide for Occupants. And Bill Bryson he wrote The History of Everything. He's written numerous books, but just really interesting stories about the body. So he says, purpose of sleep is to consolidate memories, restore hormonal balance, emptying the brain of accumulated neurotoxins, and resetting the immune system. In terms of stress, this is a great TED Talk by Kelly McGonigal, and she heads up a department at Stanford, a stress research department at Stanford. So the TED Talk is how to make stress your friend. So for instance, this was a New York Times, written up in the New York Times. It was a Harvard study. So I'm just going to go into a couple of these common views and alternative views as to how to turn stress into a positive stimulus. So stress is increasing so when I'm stressed, my body releases adrenaline and cortisol. My heart is beating faster. The first interpretation could be, stress is increasing my risk for cardiovascular disease and heart attack. Having an alternative view about that stress would be, my heart is working harder and my body is mobilizing its energy to get ready for this challenge. Wow, what a wonderful reframing of an observation of what our body's doing. Another observation could be, when I'm stressed, my stress response is causing my breathing rate to increase. This means that the common view would be, my fast breathing is a sign of anxiety. I worry about how stress is affecting my mental and physical health. An alternative view could be, I should take a deep breath. My faster breathing means more oxygen is getting to my brain so I can think more clearly. Again, just a simple reframing. Okay. So here's Stanford University has this rethinking stress toolkit. Again, Stanford University. So one way to increase your breathing, reduce your stress, also the vagus nerve goes through the diaphragm. This is called diaphragm rocking. And there is a point on the hand, and it's pretty much below what I'd call, the fold, the inside knuckle. and it's between pretty much the second and third fingers, and that's called solar plexus point. And it's the point that we usually start and end our reflexology sessions with, solar plexus point. I renamed it when I was giving a talk at a conference for children's educators. I renamed it Palm Calm. So Palm Calm. So pressing this point can really induce, and pretty quickly, calm. So we can add to that using either our thumb completely. So we put our thumb on the solar plexus point, and the rest of the thumb just lays across this line, the diaphragm line. And we're gonna just wave our hand like this, diaphragm rocking. You can also do it this way by just putting your 3 index, middle, and ring finger into the fold, and then waving your hand over it to diaphragm rock. Doing this, I would do this to put myself back to sleep at 3 o'clock in the morning when I woke up and my mind was racing about what I was going to do tomorrow. So just, laying on my side, I could do it this way. If I'm laying on my back, I might choose to do it with my thumb on the solar plexus point and my whole thumb laying across, just folding one hand over the other and then waving the hand. So Lynn Booth, this comes from Lynn Booth, and she's the founder of Vertical Reflexology Therapy. She told the story when she came to Seattle to teach a class. She was on a pretty packed airplane. A little girl was turning blue. She was having an asthmatic attack. And they asked for a doctor on the plane, and there was none. And so Lynn got up and said to the mother, "Is it okay if I show your child something that may help her?" And the mother said, "Sure." And so Lynn taught this little girl the diaphragm rock. And sure enough, the little girl's color came back. She could breathe fine again. And Lynn said, about every half hour for the rest of the trip from the UK to Seattle, this little girl would come walking down the aisle, and she would find Lynn in her seat, and she'd wave to her with the diaphragm rock. Lynn used this on a deep sea diver who had come up quite out of breath, and within minutes, within seconds actually, his breathing was restored to normal. So again, you can stick your middle index and ring finger into this crease and rock, or you can put your thumb on the solar plexus and lay the rest of your thumb across the line and fold your hand over. So breathing to reduce stress. This is a nurse who heads up a complementary medicine department in one of the New York hospitals. And she finds breathing so critical to our health that she had business cards made up that teach people how to breathe. So this is take a slow, deep breath through the nose for the count of 1, 2, 3. Hold your breath to a count of 1, 2, 3, and exhale, blowing out through the mouth to the count of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And the reason, Dr. Andrew Weil explains, the reason for counting longer on the out breath is that it tends to make you take a deeper in breath with the next inhalation. But again, something that's very free, very easy to do, and has wonderful impact, benefit to your system. So a friend of mine, Heather, who taught young children, taught me this one, finger tracing. And I actually found it online with instructions. It's another method to have children slow down and breathe. And so you breathe in and you trace up with your finger, breathe out, and the finger goes down into the valley. Breathe in, breathe out. This is a really breathe in, breathe out, breathe in. This is a nice way to get kids to physicalize the breathing and help them, you know, remember and create a pace for it. Breathe in on the ups and breathe out. Breathe in, breathe out. But it can be useful for adults too. So this is an acupressure point. It's a kidney point. It's a point on the kidney meridian, I should say. And it's known as elegant mansion. So it's a way to boost your immune system overall and strengthens the respiratory system. Also opens your ability to breathe deeply. Okay, so the recommendation is, and it's in this notch between your collarbone, your clavicle, and your sternum, your breastbone. So if you reach up and feel into that space, I find the middle finger is often the strongest to hold an acupressure point. And you can hold it for 2 to 3 minutes. If you can only hold it for a minute, it's still going to be beneficial. Repeat 3 to 5 times a day. And this comes from, there's a man named Gach, Michael Gach, G-A-C-H, and he's got great videos on YouTube, short videos. So for finding acupressure points for pretty much anything, and he shows you how to locate them. Great resource, Michael Gach, G-A-C-H. So food. I studied macrobiotics in New York City. I studied Michio Kushi's version of macrobiotics. And according to traditional Chinese medicine, in cold weather, we want to eat foods that hold in heat. We want to eat root vegetables, carrots, parsnips, onions, squashes, and avoid foods that nature designed to cast off heat. So stay away in the winter from Indian food, from Mexican food, okay? Because they're foods that'll make you sweat, you know, and you don't want to be casting off heat in the winter. You want to be holding it in. That's just a quick sauerkraut or kimchi to stave off flu. I mean, purported to be that you'll never have a flu if you have kimchi or sauerkraut every day or every other day or something like frequently. These, a client of mine told me about these Zicam nasal swabs and swears by them, that when you get a cold, it will shorten your cold, okay? Supplements that are purported to increase immune defense, elderberry. I have used elderberry all winter long for a couple of years and find it wonderful. Garlic, of course. Garlic is antimicrobial, antiviral, anti-inflammatory, anti-vampire. Essential oils for antibiotic-resistant bacteria. So so these were 2 studies for Lyme disease. But oil of oregano, both Dr. Andrew Weil and Dr. Axe. Dr. Axe has a great article about oil of oregano for infections, fungus, and even the common cold. You just have to be careful. You know, I recommend not using anything too much on a regular basis, like echinacea. I think it's recommended, it's either echinacea or golden seal. One is for flus, one is for colds. So the combination is a really nice combination. I know they have them at Marlene's Market. Some people don't do well with echinacea. They get upset stomach or something, but if you can tolerate it, I find it great for knocking out a cold. When I first start to get a cold or potentially a flu, I take echinacea and golden seal because I don't know which it's going to be. And it's fabulous, but you can only use one of the two for about a week. So you don't want to take it on a regular basis. It's just when you feel that you need to. So apparently oil of oregano is one of those that's also, some say 10 days, some say 2 weeks, but I would recommend you find some information on it from MDs or NDs and take your guidance from that. So these are possible side effects. There are allergies too. People who are allergic to mint, sage, basil, etc., probably wouldn't do good with oil of oregano. My favorite essential oils for the cold and flu season is thieves. So I don't know if if you're not familiar with thieves, it got its name because these were herbs that the grave robbers used in the Middle Ages. So they would wear these substances in a satchel around their neck to prevent them from getting sick. So I love thieves in a diffuser. You can also apply it topically. Some take it internally, but you have to make sure you have a good medical grade, pharmaceutical grade of essential oil if you're going to do that. Young Living has a formula that has thieves and I think thyme and oregano in it for immune. But again, do lots of research. Washing your hands. I thought when it was recommended, when we first hit COVID, 15 seconds meant keeping this, just washing your hands, putting soap on and keeping it under the faucet for 15 seconds. I later read, no, it takes 15 seconds for the soap to puncture the film on the virus. So you got to keep the soap on your hands for 15 seconds and then wash it off. So 2 rounds of happy birthday, I turn the water off, soap up, 15 seconds, sing happy birthday twice, and then turn the water back on. But I just wanted to share that because initially I didn't know that. So I was just putting soap on and quickly washing it off, but it needs to stay on in order for it to be effective. The same would apply to the hand sanitizers. Nasal irrigation is another possible means of keeping cold viruses, bacteria viruses out of your nasal passages. Grief meditations. In traditional Chinese medicine, the lung meridian correlates with grief. So this is and if anybody wants it, you can email me and I'll send you the link to do grief meditations. Also, Harmony Hill has coming up very soon. They're doing Zoom calls for those experiencing grief. So you might research up Harmony Hill. So I thought this was interesting, speaking of the nasopharynx and of nasal irrigation and or those Zicam swabs. So this was an article about why those who are vaccinated against COVID can still spread it. And it has to do with the type of antibody. So the IgG antibodies go deep into the body and they prevent you from becoming very ill. But they don't reach the squishy surfaces of your body like the nasopharynx, which is why the vaccines won't kill all of the virus and they can proliferate in your nasopharynx. So the long and the short of it is, while they're working on a nasal spray to help produce the IgA antibodies that we need for the nasopharynx, the best thing to do is to wear masks. And when you look at the statistics, and I'm running out of time here, but both people wearing masks will reduce the chance of transmission by 40 to 80%, whereas only one person wearing a mask, it's like 10 to 60%. So there's a real difference when everybody's wearing a mask, okay? And these were some extra slides that I had in that I don't have time to go over right now, but more interesting facts about the COVID virus, which is showing up more as a vascular disorder even than a respiratory disorder. It's a pretty wily virus. So lots of different, manifesting in lots of different ways in the body. So just to review, squeezing the webbing for stimulating upper body lymphatics, diaphragm rocking to both help it open up our chest, our diaphragm. The vagus nerve runs down the neck through the chest and then into all those internal organs that I showed. So diaphragm rocking for lots of different reasons, and having our thumb or our finger on that solar plexus point, which is a major relaxation point. The nail on nail technique for the pituitary gland. Unless you're pregnant, I would not recommend, because we use this point to help stimulate labor. So I wouldn't recommend this for someone who's pregnant. I wouldn't recommend it at all for someone who's pregnant. Let's put it at that, for doing it on themselves. And then kidney 27, boosting your immune system, strengthening the respiratory system in the notch between the clavicle and the sternum, the breastbone. And any questions? So you can unmute yourself if you, let's see, there's something in the chat. Why stop vitamin D? Something or other, this feels good. Back on my left thumb, then on my right, yep. And I'm not sure, why stop vitamin D supplement? Whose question was that? Do you want to say more about that?
That was on your slide about sleeping. At the bottom, it said, recommend stopping vitamin D supplement, I thought.
Oh, perhaps if one had COVID. There are, the Weil Institute was, and it's kind of interesting, and that has a lot to do with, I have to pull up with the cytokine storm. So because some of these substances like elderberry also is very effective in stimulating the immune system. There are some people, I don't know if you've heard that some people who get COVID, they get such a cytokine storm, which is released. It's like overdrive. The immune system goes into overdrive, okay, and is sending out too many of these molecules that actually end up damaging our organs. So some people actually die from the cytokine storm. So they were recommending, if you got COVID, to back off on some of your immune boosting supplements. And I'm sure that's a big conversation that I'm not qualified for, but in some ways it makes sense that if your system is such that you tend to get big responses, big immune overkill, that your immune system is going into overdrive, then it would be wise to back off some of those things if you actually got it. But it's fine as preventative, apparently. I mean, unless you have other reasons for not taking particular substances. Any other questions? No? Okay. Thank you all. I think we're at time. Yep. Thank you all very much. And I wish you good health for the new year. And I do have a program starting January 8th, if anyone is interested to study reflexology. So I still have room for a couple of students. Yeah. Thank you so much. I'm going to turn it over to you, Elizabeth. Do you have anything else you want to say? Oh, you're co-host anyway.